Gundam Wing was right. Not just about how fragile peace can be, but about what happens when humanity starts to replace itself. Across the wider franchise, we've seen reflections of war, discrimination, political extremism, and religious fanaticism woven into its stories. But one theme has become especially relevant in recent years, a force rapidly reshaping the technological and digital world around us: artificial intelligence. But long before AI became part of our everyday conversation, Gundam Wing was already exploring the dangers of a world that grows too dependent on it. Back in 1995, the series presented a future where autonomous weapons and machine-driven warfare threatened to strip conflict of human responsibility, emotion, and will, in the form of the mobile dolls, the destructive system that even rivaled Gundams themselves. So today, we're diving into mobile dolls, AI, and the philosophy of Treize Kustranada, and how his beliefs may have been one of Gundam's earliest warnings about the cost of removing humanity from the forefront of our society. So without further ado, let's begin. First, let's explore what the mobile dolls actually were in Gundam Wing. The mobile doll system was an autonomous mobile suit operating system developed by the military organization Oz to counter the overwhelming power of the Gundams and their pilots. Up until that point, Oz simply could not compete. The Gundams built from near indestructible Gundanium alloy possessed overwhelming durability, mobility, and firepower. Or as we'd say in modern times, they were built diff. The Oz army stood no chance against these behemoths. They were simply overpowered in every way imaginable. So to compete with that, the dolls were created. The system was integrated into different Oz suits, such as the Torres and the Virgo. Where human pilots had limits, the mobile dolls did not. Their reaction speeds were practically instantaneous, their aim precise. They didn't hesitate, panic, or tire. An average Oz soldier could never hope to match the level of superbness, the abilities of these autonomous machines. They were truly that great, and perhaps more importantly, they were unmanned. To Oz, the appeal was obvious: fewer soldiers lost, with greater combat efficiency, and machines capable of producing results no human force could achieve. Looking at it purely from a military perspective, who could really blame them? Where us humans need to eat, sleep, and rest, the mobile dolls did not. As development continued, Oz even used combat data gathered from pilots like Hiro Yui and Troa Bolton to refine the next generation of mobile dolls, the Virgo unit, and they were terrifying. The Virgo mobile dolls became a lethal threat to anyone who stood against them, including the Gundam pilots themselves, with a highly powerful beam cannon with destructive power, and also equipped with a highly defensive electromagnetic barrier to protect them from attacks. The Virgo was truly a destructive unit. But the true danger of the mobile dolls wasn't just their firepower, it was how they fundamentally changed the nature of warfare. Soldiers were no longer needed on the battlefield. Instead of pilots risking their lives on the front lines, war was directed remotely, coordinating the autonomous weapons from safety, far away from the conflict itself. In that kind of system, only one side truly bears the cost of war. And with enough technological advancement, even those remaining human operators could eventually be removed altogether. But what happens to war when humanity itself is removed from it? What do we lose in the pursuit of perfect efficiency? What happens when you take the consequences of loss of life away from the battlefield? Well, Treize himself had a lot to say on this.
I'd like to express my regret over the lost souls by appealing to you to recognize how priceless man's life is. I fear that the era of the soulless weapons called mobile dolls may become an embarrassment to the people of the future.
Treize believed that war, as horrific as it is, carries meaning because human beings were directly tied to its consequences. The pain, sacrifice, fear, and loss forced people to confront the true weight of conflict. But the moment machines begin fighting in humanity's place, something dangerous happens. Human life starts losing its value. And that's the point Treize was getting at. Humans' over-reliance on AI systems can lead to our detriment. The more warfare becomes automated, the easier it becomes for those in power to distance themselves from the consequences of their decisions. Because normally, the choice to wage war is restricted by one brutal reality: people will die. Your soldiers, your citizens, your families. It forces leaders and nations to weigh whether conflict is truly worth pursuing. But when autonomous weapons are fighting instead, that psychological barrier begins to disappear. War becomes cleaner, easier, more detached, almost as if you're playing a game. And honestly, that comparison feels disturbingly accurate. Conflict starts to resemble strategy games like Civ, or even my favorite 4X series, Endless, where units become statistics, casualties become numbers on a screen, and decisions are made from a safe distance without ever truly feeling the human costs behind them. We see this clearly in Gundam Wing throughout the mobile doors, and later again in Gundam 00 with the automatons in Season 2. Once there's too little risk on your own side, going to war for increasingly smaller reasons starts becoming justifiable. The emotional and moral weight of conflict begins to erode away, and that idea doesn't just exist in fiction anymore. Even in our modern era, warfare has become increasingly remote. Missiles, drones, and coordinated strikes can be launched from entirely different continents by operators sitting thousands of miles away from the battlefield itself. But the people on the receiving end, enemy soldiers, civilians, entire cities, to those far removed from the conflict, they risk becoming a little more than statistics. Casualties displayed in reports, numbers on a screen rather than human lives. And that's the unsettling reality Gundam Wing was warning about nearly 3 decades ago. Now, for many of us, war itself can feel distant and abstract, making these ideas harder to fully connect with. But warfare isn't the only place where dependence on AI is reshaping how society values human contributions. We're already seeing similar outcomes across modern tech industries. As AI is rapidly advancing, companies are increasingly prioritizing automation and machine efficiency over human labor. Major corporations like Microsoft, Oracle, and Meta have all invested heavily into AI initiatives, while simultaneously carrying out significant layoffs across their departments. And in a way, it echoes Tracer's fears perfectly. The value of human involvement begins shrinking when machines can perform tasks faster, cheaper, and at greater scale. The quality may not always be better, but efficiency often outweighs humanity in the eyes of corporations and systems driven by results. We can just look at the Romefeller Foundation in Gundam Wing and how they treated soldiers and prioritized mobile dolls above all else, even stripping away resources from other colonies to add to their initiative. It's an interesting parallel when we think about things such as RAM prices, food prices, and energy going up due to what's happening in the world of AI. And this is why I say Gundam is a reflection of our reality. When you really think about it and look down in the details, it's happening again and again, in different eras, at different times, in different ways, but it's all related. It's pretty crazy, honestly. It's actually quite wild. But now I really think about it, perhaps this conversation isn't solely about AI. Perhaps AI is simply the newest evolution of a much older problem: humanity becoming increasingly detached from the consequences of war. And when you look throughout human history, that pattern has always existed. Think about it. There was a time where conflict meant facing another person directly, fighting with your own fists, stones, spears, or swords. Then came bows and crossbows, weapons that allowed people to kill each other from a distance. Then catapults, trebuchets, rifles, pistols, machine guns, tanks, rockets, and aircrafts. And now drones, autonomous systems, and AI-assisted warfare. With every technological leap, humanity creates more distance between itself and the people suffering on the other side of the conflict. Now, let's just be clear. I'm not saying that warfare thousands of years ago was somehow better or more humane. Humanity has always fought wars. History is filled with violence. But one thing has changed. The people making decisions about war are now much more removed from its consequences than ever before. And Gundam explores that idea constantly. In Gundam 00, orbital and satellite-based superweapons place unimaginable destructive power into the hands of a selected few. In Zeta Gundam, Connolly lasers and solar weapon systems turn entire population into collateral damage, and what's frightening is how often these stories justify mass death as a necessary sacrifice for peace and order or some greater future. You once again see this in Gundam Zeta with the Titans, where they would justify gassing a whole Connolly who didn't side with them to force a quicker end to the war with the Aeg. In their eyes, killing millions in that way was worth it rather than dragging on a war. And the same with the Zabis back in the 1 Year War. Millions of lives reduced to a strategic calculation. That's the tragedy Gundam repeatedly tries to confront, and honestly, I think that's why these stories still resonate to this day. Because even outside of war, we increasingly live in systems where people become statistics, numbers, data points, efficiency metrics. The human element slowly fades into the background. And that's why I appreciate Gundam so much. Yes, the franchise gives us incredible mobile suit battles, iconic rivalries, and unforgettable action scenes. It gets us hyped watching our favorite pilots fight in the greatest of battles. But beneath all of that, Gundam has always been deeply anti-war. At its core, it's a series about the tragedy of conflict, the loss of human life, and the emotional scars left behind by violence. And I think those messages are more important now more than ever, especially when discussing AI and automation. Because when it comes down to the value of humanity itself, Treize understood something deeply important. Beneath all the philosophy, elegance, and theatrics, Treize recognized a truth that still feels painfully relevant today. The moment society becomes too comfortable replacing people with systems, humanity itself risks being secondary to efficiency. Our humanity will also be replaced and lost within these systems of efficiency. And that's a reality we'll continually need to come to terms with.